Deep within the Segmentum Pacificus, to the galactic west of Holy Terra, an event known as the War of the False Primarch saw the 33rd millennium plunged into war. Little is known about the true events of this conflict, being a minor footnote in Games Workshop's expansive history of the Warhammer 40k universe, but not all has been lost to the ravages of time and censure. While the identity of the False Primarch is unknown, they succeeded in rousing chaos and rebellion in the sector, biting back against the hand of the Greater Imperium. The High Lords of Terra saw fit to task the Adeptus Astartes in the suppression of the False Primarch and inducted 5 Space Marine chapters into a holy fraternity dubbed the Pentarchy of Blood. The Carcharodons, the Flesh Eaters, the Red Talons, the Death Eagles, and the Charnel Guard saw to the sector running red with traitor blood over the next 80 years, eventually leading to the False Primarchs slain and their name purged from history itself. In this video series, I'll be going into the 5 chapters of the Pentarchy of Blood, some being more famous in the eyes of the fandom, and some a little more obscure, starting off with the ever so popular Silent Hunters, the Carcharodons. The Carcharodons, more formally known as Carcharodons Astra, or informally as the Space Sharks, are a Space Marine chapter shrouded in an air of mystery within the 40k universe, but are probably one of the more well-known chapters I've covered here on the channel. In a more meta sense, the Space Sharks are actually some of 40k's oldest Space Marines, having been proudly featured in the original Rogue Trader rulebooks back in 1987, albeit with a different appearance from their modern incarnation. Born from an unknown founding, Imperial scribes have had great difficulty exacting the true origins and existence of this chapter, as no records of their activities are ever disclosed by the chapter. The only evidence to their background sits within files sealed and secured by none other than the Inquisition themselves. So, yeah, it may as well just not exist, really. The broken and censured records suggest many different reasons for their founding, from an ancient event known as the Astropath Wars, whose details begin and end at the name of Astropath Wars, to a shaky connection to the Mythos Angelica Mortis, an ancient treaty establishing the Astartes Praeses, which I recently did a video on actually, if you hadn't seen it. The Space Shark's true genetic lineage is also heavily guarded.
Who is your daddy, and what does he do?
Although there is conjecture drawn from clues that suggest that they were born from the gene stock of Corvus Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard. Their combat doctrine is very similar to the Sons of Corax, and their chapter master is known as the Shade Lord, the same title used by Arcus Fall, who was a great commander during the Great Crusade of the Raven Guard, who was eventually exiled. However, nothing has been proven, and due to their general movement patterns, the Imperium determined that the risk of obtaining that information heavily outweighs whatever kind of revelations may come from the ordeal. After all, if you spend a couple hundred years trying to find a fleet of ships in the middle of the abyss and find, 1,000 very cranky Astartes led by a man with chainsaws for hands, it's probably not worth the trouble. Don't worry about it, guys. The Space Sharks' general aloofness falls down to the fact that they operate very differently from standard Space Marine operations. The Sharks patrol from the very edge of known space and beyond, commonly being so far from Imperial space that many don't know of their existence at all, just from sheer distance. When they see a threat or are summoned from the void, they attack their foes in one of 2 ways depending on the situation. Either from stealth, sneaking as close as possible to their enemy's vitals before striking, or with a blitzkrieg ambush from an exposed flank, overwhelming their foes with sheer power. The methodology is very similar to the Raven Guard, and the comparison to a shark hunting its prey should also be pretty obvious here, but then again, as previously stated, Games Workshop has never been known for their subtlety. Then again, if you do have the administrative power to have a bunch of sharks at your command, I guess you do reserve the right to operate them as you see fit.
Sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads.
With their propensity to strike so quickly and with such ferocity from the remote reaches of space, the Space Sharks are frequently beyond the reaches of Imperial resupply lines. This sees to them salvaging arms and materials from wherever they can, favoring equipment that's easy to repair and upkeep. It's common to see their battle brothers adorned in a mix of varying marks of power armor. In particular, a very popular choice was the Mark V Heresy pattern armor, which was held together by and equipped with extra molecular bonding studs, which quickly saw to the Mark V becoming a staple in keeping the Space Shark's armory operable due to the ease of repair. If you need a new pauldron and something is vaguely metal, just flex seal it on, good as new. Speaking of their appearance, the Carcharodons' uniform is a dark gray with black on the pauldron fields, very similar to some chapters like the Relictors. Something wholly unique to the Carcharodons, though, is the influence of the real-world Maori people on their chapter identity, usually accredited mostly to Robbie McNivens, who authored a book series for the chapter. I'm not buying another ebook just to verify that. I told you, I don't read these books after I buy them. It's just a waste of money. So the source on this is just going to have to be Just Trust Me, or It Was Revealed to Me in a Dream, or my favorite.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
The Maori people are known for their eye-catching tattoos, and the Carcharodons have inherited the same ornamentation, both on their skin and on their armor. In-universe, this is usually referred to as exile markings, giving even further credence to their heritage as exiled Raven Guard descendants. Another one of the Space Shark's most notable traits is, actually the lack of one. The Carcharodons have no battle cry, no theme songs, not even a catchphrase. In fact, they're known for the eerie silence that surrounds them. In combat, they stay completely silent, the quiet only broken to give or receive orders. No grunts, heaves, or even an oddly sexual Dark Souls 1 hurt sound effect. It's exactly the one you're thinking about, but don't worry, I'm not going to play. This complete lack of sound even translates to their life aboard their nomadic fleet, the hulls of their battle barges being dead silent. Many space sharks pass the time in quiet prayer or simply opt into cryosleep, a fact that may contribute to the long lifespans many of their ranks seem to have. While the Carcharodons' origins may be shrouded in secrecy, their deeds and accomplishments are Herculean. In fact, I have revised this part of the script multiple times to try and condense them into a reasonable size because it was getting way out of control and the script is already long enough, trust me. The Space Sharks were large contributors in conflicts such as the Battle of Zartak fighting against the Night Lords, the War in the Deeps against the Tyranid Menace, and the Solar Rebellions suppressing Chaos Uprisings alongside their future Pentarchy of Blood inductees, the Death Eagles. One notable contribution from the Sharks that I want to mention was during the early days of the Angevin Crusade, the time when the Imperium was pushing into what would later become known as the Segmentum Obscurus in the Galactic North. A rogue traitor named Basil Horothus took to the world of Loth to strike against Dark Eldar pirates that were roaming the area, yet found him and his crew in the heart of the Hornet's Nest. Their ship, the Stark Venger, had crashed on the planet, covered in endless storms and an unending night. There, Basil and his men stood their ground for a month, repelling Dark Eldar slavers and corsairs. As the Dark Eldar seized their position, the distress beacon was finally answered by silent, hulking monstrosities of dark gray steel, their lightning claws spraying gore and viscera across the ship's hull. Thunderhawks broke the cloud like lightnings as Astartes rained death on the retreating Dark Eldar. Basil and what remained of his men had been saved despite all odds, and met with the commander of the Astartes. His skin was ghastly white and his eyes pure black, and he spoke in High Gothic, an outdated language compared to modern vocabulary, who informed him of the Imperial Navy's arrival to the area soon. He then politely, yet firmly, requested a portion of whatever supplies remained aboard the wreckage. The commander was never able to identify who his saviors were, as they departed from the battlefield just shortly before the Imperial Navy arrived, leading to a rare, recorded space shark encounter that may have had a massive contribution to the Imperial conquest snowballing in the sector. Think about it. If Basil and the Imperial Navy had never gotten a foothold in the sector, the modern-day owners of the Segmentum Obscurus and by extension the Calixtus sector, may be very different. But really, the main thing I love about this is that it was very hilarious when they make special note that their high command is very well mannered. I don't know. I just think it's very charming. I've known a lot of Maori and Samoan people in my life, being Filipino, and those people are wild, dude. And just thinking about them mining their manners is just, I don't know, it's just so funny. I don't know. Most famous of all Space Shark involvement was during the Badab War. During the war, 6 companies of Space Sharks made an unexpected appearance in the galactic northwest of the Maelstrom Zone, on the outskirts of the Golgothan Wastes. Shade Lord Tybros contacted the Loyalist forces in the sector, formally requesting to join the war effort, bringing their support to the Loyalist forces with that signature Space Shark politeness we all know and love. The Loyalist forces screened the mysterious strangers, subjecting them to intense gene sampling and psychic interrogation. With the Inquisitor Legate approving for their involvement, the Carcharodons immediately plunged themselves into the Endymion Cluster, the territory of the Mantis Warriors. Rushing past the Fire Angels who were slowly sieging the Mantis Warriors' homeworld of Endymion Prime, the Carcharodons brought upon the Mantis Warriors such a ridiculous ass-whooping across their sector that they had almost immediately knocked the Mantis Warriors out of the war in a superhuman blitzkrieg. The Badab War itself is its own entire realm, so I won't get into that rabbit hole now. The Space Sharks in general are on the more fleshed out side of the Pentarchy of Blood, and I could go on about them for quite some time, like in Badab or their uneasy alliance with the Ashen Claws that I covered in my Shattered Legions video, by the way. But I do actually have some models to like make, so let's actually, get on with it. I initially got in this Primaris model as I wanted to have a cool, menacing pose where the Marine was walking forward, but then I remembered that I had a mini just like this in my box of the new Mark 6 Marines. Thank you to Mr. Kalig for that. He funded the box a long time ago, but I did get it. This is my proof. Not only is it the same pose as the mini I was going to use initially, but being an older armor mark prevents me from having to do significant reef sculpting. I've demonstrated that I'm unhinged enough to do it, but I'm going to use the easy option this time. The first step that I was going to take on this conversion was using this metal awl to punch a bunch of pilot holes in a loose diagonal grid across the leg. While this is not Mark V armor, bonding studs are a common feature for the Carcharodons, so I definitely wanted to include a bunch on this conversion. These are 1.2mm ball bearings that came as a recommendation from someone, and they turned out to be pretty much a 95% match to the size of the pre-molded bonding studs that you find on various armors. I just used a bigger pin vise drill bit that I normally use to drill just enough to rest the ball about halfway in. Then I secured it with gel superglue. I'm very happy with the result of this, and the size is, like I said, almost a very perfect match. So if you are the guy that recommended this to me, you know who you are. Thank you very much. Next step were the arms. I'm choosing to use 2 arms from the Monopose Assault Intercessors kit since I have so many of them laying around. This open hand bit may be one of my favorite bits in the entire range, like ever, although the pauldron has to come off. I cut off the pauldron and chose to replace it with one of the Mark 6 pauldrons covered in bonding studs to bring the bonding stud aesthetic to the top of the model. The arm and the pauldron were both secured into place with some green stuff and superglue. As for the left arm, I'm using another bit from the Monopose Assault Intercessor kit, although the pauldron was replaced by this super nice and fancy Space Sharks pauldron. This was a 3D print, and the entire STL pack covers multiple different armor types for the Sharks. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to get these. They're super cheap. The whole set was like, I don't know, like $5. If you don't have a 3D printer, Space Sharks are very popular, so you can buy 3D printed bits or even decals if you want to go that route. There's no shortage of materials for the Space Sharks, don't worry. Going back to the arm, the left arm came holding a pistol, but I cut off the hand to replace it with a melee weapon. For this, I stole a power maul from the Chaos Legionnaires kit for 2 reasons. 1, we don't really see a lot of power mauls anymore, and 2, it's lore appropriate for a Space Shark to use whatever equipment he can get his hands on. If you know you're not getting resupplied for another couple decades, I don't think you really care if your bonking stick has a bird or an 8-pointed star on it. It bonks good enough either way. Finally, the last part of assembly was to choose a head, and I chose this Sergeant helm from the Mark IV Space Marine kit, which I think is probably my favorite Space Marine kit. I like the large flat panels of the face grille, and it helps complete the look overall, being a salvaged mess of Mark IV through Mark VI with some looted Chaos gear thrown in. I like it a lot. And now time for painting. The Carcharodons sport a gray power armor with black pauldron fields and are known for their intricate Maori-inspired armor markings called exile markings. While I started from a black primer, I proceeded to do my usual for black armor, that is, base coat dark gray, dry brush neutral gray, then dry brush a light gray. But notice that I said black armor? Yeah, I'm not a smart pup. I just reflexively started painting black armor. In fact, the entire time I was sitting here working on this mini, I'm sitting here looking at it and like, man, that's kind of dark for gray. I don't know what's going on, but, maybe it'll work out. I'm just a fucking moron. It had only really occurred to me what was going on when I started doing freehands, and I had to throw a base coat over my freehanding and start over, so that kind of hurt my soul. But in retrospect, it was definitely the right call. Now, the armor was pretty simple when I could get it right, having started from a gray base coat and dry brushed sky gray, and then a white on the sharpest points. The exile markings were a bit of a different story, so I'm going to split the screen here for a tangent talk here to talk about the tattoos of the Maori people. As always, I've tried very hard to get my research accurate, with most of the info pulled from a official tattoo resource site. But if any passing Maori dude wants to correct me, I not only welcome you, but I insist that you do. Having accurate information about other cultures is very important to me, so yeah, if I mess up anything, please let me know. When talking about Maori style tattoos, it's very important to know that there are mainly 2 types of these tattoos, kirituhi and tamako. Kirituhi is the design style that normally goes on the body, while the tamako is the style that goes on one's face. While both are very similar on the surface in terms of aesthetics, tamako is reserved for the Maori people. Anyone can get kirituhi, but tamako facial tattoos are the domain of the native Maori people, and having those tattoos on your face when you are not of the native or not Maori can be seen as offensive if you are not of the native populace. Regardless of flavor, all of the designs are very super intricate. It's not just what you tattoo, but the negative space and then how you infill the other shapes. Like, it's a very free-form design that usually hugs the natural body shape and kind of goes with your musculature, which is like the exact kind of thing I have a lot of trouble designing. We're going to look at some footage that I have from before the repaint of the armor, but I did spend a little time sketching out designs. My target areas were the right arm, left forearm, chest, and the outside of the left leg. Given the contrast of the size of the Maori people, seriously, these people are just naturally huge. I've never met one that wasn't just ripped. But the contrast to a 1.5-inch size plastic spaceman is a little, there's some differences there. But I knew on these small areas I could only be so ornate So instead of trying to do very big designs, I tried to lean heavier on infill patterns or geometric patterns, since I knew those were going to be easier to paint on such a small surface. I fretted about my design for hours, but I knew at the end of the day, I just had to do it. So I watered down some white paint, broke out my sharp brush, and just went for it. I'm very sorry to say I did not do these on camera. I have enough trouble just staying in frame with my shit-ass phone camera when base coating. When it comes to freehands, there's there's no way. I gotta contort to do that. But as you can see, I kind of ended up deviating from my original plans, but I think it came out all right. It could be better, but I think it gets the aesthetic across at least. Or not. Like I said, I'm not a tattoo artist. For the rest of the mini, I used 2 thin coats metallics for all the gold and silver areas. I used to always stick with Citadel metallics, not really out of choice, it's just more like everything else really sucked compared to them, but I really like Duncan's metallics here, so I'm probably going to stick with these for the future. I need to test more of the 2 thin coats brand out in general, but I've already got enough paint as is. I want to use up what I've got before I try it out. But so far, really good first impressions. With all the base coating done, it came to shading, and shading the mini meant coming back to old reliable, the Ghetto Marine Juice. Sonic Sledgehammer detailed this recipe that mimics an old Forge World recipe that the heavy metal studio painters used to use when painting a lot of minis. This recipe is a little deviation, but man, I love this mixture. I use it a lot. I've been using it for a lot of my videos lately. It's just very fire and forget. Just, you know, watch for pooling as usual. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it. And with my marine all juiced up, I just scribbled out a base and it was good to go. And here I present to you the completed Carcharodons Outtro. I contemplated adding on some green stuff bones or shark tooth necklaces on the larger surfaces, but I think putting the emphasis on the exile markings instead was the right call. Plus, I've tried making green stuff necklaces in the past, and it's just a massive headache, man. But yeah, I really love the posing of this mini, and I'm just generally a big fan of neutral poses in general. I think that's becoming the part of minis that really make it or break it for me. When I'm browsing through what other people make, or when I'm making my own thing, I usually try to be very attentive to how the body is positioned, and seeing some really whack-ass poses on Instagram, yeah, it makes me really attentive to that. But anyways, I love this mini, and it's quickly climbed the ranks as one of my favorite Marines I've ever made. It's that simple. It's fucking cool. As previously stated, this is the first video in a small mini-series that covers the entirety of the Pentarchy of Blood. If you like what I do here, or you don't want to miss the next video, I'd love to have your subscription. If you really like what I do and want to support me, you can also find me on Patreon, or you could follow me on Instagram. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.